Hello and welcome to another edition of my Art Broker Talks. I'm your host, Sheena Carrington, and I am joined here today once again by none other than our two sales specialists at my Art Broker, Jasper Tordoff and Louis Densitz. Jasper, Louis, how are you both today?
Hi, Sheena. I'm doing great. It's been a really exciting week in the art world, so I can't wait to get into it.
Jasper, how are you doing?
I share exactly that. Yeah, lovely. The weather's become quite nice in the UK, and lots has been happening, as Louis mentioned.
Lots has indeed been happening across the pond in the New York May sales, which I am so excited to discuss today because, as we know, these sales carry immense importance to the art market. They concluded last week with Christie's Impressionist sales on Saturday, and these New York sales really set the standard narrative for the art market annually. Situated in the heart of the art market in New York City, these sales provide crucial pricing data that dealers, auction houses, buyers, consigners, everyone looks to these sales to really determine the estimates and prices for the remaining transactions throughout the year. So therefore, us in the art market, we really anticipate these sales, and also we really hope to see significant outcomes from this series of sales. So before we get into the individual sales, I really want to address the elephant in the room with both of you. Christie's cyber attack, what is now known, what has been referred to as the technology security incident, post Christie sale, just the incident. So let's talk about what happened with these sales. Who wants to take this for me?
Sure, happy to give it a stab. Essentially, the issue was observed on Thursday evening, so May 9th, and essentially on Friday morning, a placeholder was placed on Christie's website with an apology note explaining that the website was offline, which it remained throughout the Christie's post-war and contemporary day sale that took place on Friday. And Christie's confirmed a technology-related security issue via email, but that the auctions would proceed as usual.
And they did, right? Proceed they did.
And they certainly did. I think it caused a lot of anxiety in the art world. I think that a lot of people, as soon as they hear the words technology, breaches, cybersecurity, of course, it alerts them. It would alert me as well. And Christie's has remained very tight-lipped about what has truly gone down. But I have no doubt that more information will be revealed soon.
Right. And, you know, the big thing hearing about these sales, Christie's was poised to bring in $500 to $600 million in artwork. So naturally, when we see the news of this on the weekend eve that these major New York sales are going to commence, obviously it's going to raise major concerns. Jasper, what was your take on this? What did you find out?
I think first and foremost, hats off to the staff at Christie's to be able to A, carry on with the sale, and then B, for the sale to be a huge success. I mean, the final numbers were very close to, if not, they just beat Sotheby's in terms of profit over the sale period. You're dealing with high value artworks and collections and big sort of really important people and very sensitive information. So I agree with Louis, the moment that this becomes threatened or it becomes compromised in any way, I'm very surprised that there wasn't more withdrawals of lots, and it seems like they managed to keep their buyers confident and bullish and bidding up many lots. But they had 4 withdrawals, which I know some of them were the 11th hour. But it's amazing to be able to go through and navigate those difficult circumstances. So must have been tough for them.
I completely agree, Louis, as you mentioned. The fact of the matter is that we don't know a whole lot about what has happened. Christie's has remained very tight-lipped, but Jasper, as you said, how the auction house managed to pull off their series of sales was quite remarkable, actually. And, they still did well considerably. This was the second time in less than a year that Christie's has experienced, some sort of cyber attack, or what we're referring to now as a technology issue. And they're just massive challenges to circumnavigate. Essentially, when we're talking about investing in a market, the first thing that buyers look towards is assurance and confidence. They want to see confidence in the market, which stems to, two aspects, which is the numbers and market control. So when something like this happens, it doesn't only affect Christie's auction house, it kind of affects the entire art market as a whole and the confidence level in that. But regardless, as you mentioned, Christie's did manage to pull off some heavyweight sales with a lot of successful artwork. So that was, that was really nice to see, especially given the anticipation that was surrounding these sales. So let's see. The numbers across all the auction houses, I want to provide this briefly for our listeners, and we will be providing this in a market report in detail. So do check back. Across the auction houses, Christie's pulled in 529.6 million across 6 sales in 1 week. Sotheby's pulled off 530.7 million across 5 sales. So Jasper, as you mentioned, there's not that big of a difference right there. And Phillips across 3 sales, which is standard for the auction house, they pulled off 90.5 million. So big numbers right there. And we will be reporting more on those and how they compare to 2023 later. So do check back to our magazine for all of our listeners. But Louis and Jasper, enough with the incidents. I want to get into the sales. So I know you have 2 artists that you want to talk about. These 2 artists were very important. It was also something that I've noticed from monitoring the sales, which I think is really interesting. Let's talk about Basquiat and David Hockney. Starting with Sotheby's. Louis, do you want to kick us off with Basquiat? How did Basquiat do in Sotheby's sale?
Yes, I really wanted to talk about Jean-Michel Basquiat because he really did reign supreme across all auction houses during Gigaweek. For those of you who have never heard that expression, it's a bit of a term of endearment that we use to refer to a week filled with billion-dollar art sales across all major auction houses. And that's what happened last week at Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips. I think that the first piece that's worth mentioning from the Sotheby's sale is the unsold piece that was produced by Basquiat and Warhol from 1984. So just as a quick reminder, the estimate for that piece was $15 to $20 million. The hammer price was $17 million, which means that the price realized with BP was just shy of $19.5 million. And what's really remarkable about this piece is that it was previously sold in 2010 for what was at the time a whopping $2.6 million. And it was very recently exhibited at the Louis Vuitton exhibition that displayed the artwork of Basquiat and Warhol. And the scale is unbelievable. It's almost 3 by 4 meters long. It's a huge piece. And it really is momentous in the art world. So the fact that a piece like this one sold for almost the high estimate is really impressive. And it goes to show the type of appetite that collectors currently have for pieces produced by both Warhol and Basquiat together.
Right. I do remember that exhibition. I was fortunate enough to go to it myself. I believe you were too, Louis. Am I right?
I did go, yes. I actually specifically took the Eurostar and went to Paris just to go see that exhibition. I felt as though if I didn't see it, I would have FOMO for a while. So I was fortunate enough to go see it. And it really was an impressive exhibition. Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat produced about 160 works together between 1983 and 1985. So they were incredibly prolific during that 2-year window. And the Louis Vuitton Foundation pulled off this incredible operation where they were able to pull in about 70 of those works. And it was the first time that we saw so many works that were produced by both artists in the same space. So yeah, I do feel very fortunate that I got to see it. And we're still seeing the ramifications of that exhibition today on the art market, which is incredible.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I went to the exhibition, that was one of the first things that went through my mind was, when are these works going to appear on the secondary market? And well, we didn't have to wait long because it's May New York sales right now, and one just sold for 17 million. So it's success. I know there were 2 other Basquiat works in Sotheby's sale. Just to paint our listeners a picture, Louis said that Basquiat reigned supreme. He was absolutely right throughout these sales. 2 other works sold, an untitled oil stick and paper collage for 8.5 million, and another work, a large scale titled Campaign, in its second time auction appearance, sold for 10 million, which previously sold for 4.4 million in 2015. So just to paint a picture of how well Basquiat did in these auctions, he was really in every single sale, which was really exciting to see. Jasper, David Hockney. Where was David Hockney in these auctions?
Well, it was quite a funny one, because typically we see a lot of his prints in these sales, particularly works like The Arrival of Spring, which can fetch £250,000, etc. And they're like the prints that Hockney collectors like. What we really saw was quite a sporadic display of works, and there wasn't many prints, particularly any prints of note, that actually went through these sales. However, there was a lovely piece called The Bigger Wave, which was probably not like any typical Hockney original work that you've seen before. I know we were discussing earlier the California, which is a painting he did in 1965, which sold a few months ago and made just over $20 million. Now that was a great work, but it was very Hockney-esque. It was very typically Hockney. Whereas The Bigger Wave, which is a large work that he produced in 1989, it was a work done over 4 panels, and it's about 180 by 150 centimeters. Now, this work achieved just below the high estimate. So it was a really strong result for a not so typical Hockney. It was sort of really realistically drawn wave in thick impasto paint. Now, this is just an interesting piece. It shows the appetite that sort of big collectors still have for David Hockney works. And I know it's the first time that it came to auction. So that was a really good result and really, really nice to see for the market. Yeah, it was definitely a case of more originals than prints for Hockney throughout this sort of sale period.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's so funny. Usually we do, as you said, we see so many in the evening sales. We will see large scale Arrival of Spring canvases where we look at them and we're like, oh, this is immediately a Hockney. It's immediately identifiable as a Hockney. But this work, when I saw it, I had to take a second look. I'm a Hockney fan, so I was excited to see it. But nonetheless, I was like, wow, I have never seen that work before. But I guess it did. Hockney's always been fascinated with different depictions and interpretations of water. So this was the interpretation of that.
A work that he did after his Pool series as well, which is interesting. Okay. You can see the influence. There's almost like a bit of a Japanese influence on that Bigger Wave, I thought, perhaps as well. Whether that was intentional or not, I'm not sure, but that's sort of what I see when I look at it.
I didn't think about that until you just said it, but I see it now. If any one of our listeners want to get in touch with Jasper about David Hockney, he has an immense amount of knowledge about his market and his work, so please do so. I want to move into Phillips' sale. Of course, there were more Basquiats. He was everywhere. Louis, tell me about the Basquiats in Phillips' sale.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, he really was everywhere. There are 3 beautiful pieces that sold at Phillips. One of them is the untitled Elmar, The estimate was $40 to $60 million. The hammer price was just above $40 million, which means that the price realized with buyer's premium was approximately $46.5 million. This was an auction debut, and it was exhibited at the Louis Vuitton Foundation, but back in 2018 and 19. So not the exhibition that combined the work of Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat, but a solo retrospective for Jean-Michel Basquiat back in 2019. And other noteworthy works were the untitled Portrait of Famous Ball Player from 1981. The estimate was $6.5 to $8.5 million. The hammer price was $6.5 million, and the price realized was $7.9 million. Once again, a first-time auction appearance, a good result. Fitting squarely within that estimate. And finally, an untitled Grain Alcohol. The estimate was $1 to $1.5 million, and the hammer price was 1.6. So the price realized with BP was just under $2 million. A very strong result above the high estimate. This was the second time that this piece appeared at auction. It initially sold at Sotheby's in Amsterdam in 1988. And has remained in a private collection since 1990. So it was quite the event to see this piece appearing on the secondary market. And the numbers speak for themselves. People really wanted their hands on that piece.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about those numbers right now, trying to challenge the swiftness of calculations in my head. What does that amount to? Something like maybe 64 million in Basquiat artworks alone for Phillips sale, which is amazing. It was a nice combination of, fresh to the market works, also works that have appeared for a second time, and also works that have carried a very prestigious provenance, tracing back to the Foundation Louis Vuitton, which was nice to see. Jasper, were there any David Hockneys in Phillips evening or day sales?
Yeah, there was. I think the bigger point was to maybe discuss about what wasn't there as opposed to what was actually there. What you typically see with Phillips is they normally have a really good breadth of Hockney work, so early etchings all the way up to sort of newer iPad pieces, which I know have been sort of coming to auction fairly recently. This is probably the element of why they're not there, I think is interesting. And speaking with Hockney collectors day in, day out, there is this element of, since the market has become slightly deflated since the prices of 2022, many of which the iPad works, his recent works from 2010 onwards, were breaking records. These were sort of new to the market and people going absolutely nuts for these. Subsequently, sort of Q4 2023, the prices have slowly been sort of dropping off. And perhaps you're just seeing a lot of collectors holding on to these works. And but also what's interesting as well is looking at the demand of private sale as opposed to public sale. So perhaps they're not selling as well publicly at auction. I mean, some have even passed as of recently, which means that they're failing to make the low reserve. Whereas on a private level, we have got an unbelievable demand for works like this. So the arrival of Springs, the Yosemite series. And so it's a really interesting dynamic where you would perhaps think that all these people would be bidding them up at auction, but it's not necessarily true. And so when you have that dynamic, it is really important to look at sort of private demand. And maybe that's what happened with the Phillips sale, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's really insightful. I mean, and it's also true, when I was mentioning about, art market confidence, one of the first things that investors or collectors want to see when they're entering a market is the numbers. They want to see steady numbers. Although, as you mentioned, maybe on the secondary market, Hockney's market originals or whichever medium may have appeared to drop off slightly. That doesn't really necessarily indicate concern for an artist's market. More so, these are kind of natural fluctuations that we see in a very healthy market. And what you said about private sales, I mean, the reality is 2023 was a really difficult year macroeconomically. And, we're still kind of coming out of that a little bit. They're the first round of May New York sales, and in challenging market conditions, what the truth is that a lot of buyers and sellers, they go to the private market.
Yes. No, exactly. I think, yeah, it's an important point you made about the macro, the economics of everything. That there's obviously demand. Louis been talking about the Basquiat sales, which have been fantastic, and also the Hockney piece. The sell-through rates have been really, really strong. But it's also really good to consider them as two separate markets: the sort of auction market, the private sale market, because we've got huge demand, but perhaps it's not showing via the auction platform.
Yeah. Absolutely. So moving into Christie's sale, I don't want to say they struggled. They circumnavigated what could have been a catastrophe problem. So the first sale to go live of Christie's was the 21st Century sale. Louis, do you want to tell me about this sale? What happened in this sale?
Yes, absolutely. You were being very diplomatic, Sheena. Hats off to you. Yes, of course. Let's be honest. The Christie's sale was not ideal, and they could have struggled. Regardless of the cybersecurity issue, something that's really important to mention is the fact that there was a withdrawal of a $30 million Bryce Martin, and that was their star lot. Now, despite that, thankfully, Christie's had a few tricks up their sleeves, and that is what allowed for, as always, and that is what allowed for Jean-Michel Basquiat to once again reign supreme, and Basquiat became their star artist. So something that's worth mentioning right off the bat is obviously the Italian version of Popeye has no pork in his diet. That is the title of the star lot at the Christie sale by the one and only Jean-Michel Basquiat. It's a piece from 1982. The estimate was about $30,000 million, and the hammer price was 27.5, which means that the price realized with BP was $32 million, so above the high estimate. And this was a first-time auction appearance, and it performed really well. And essentially, dare I say that it saved the sale? Would you agree with that?
I mean,
is that too bold of a statement? You're too.
I mean, we're giving credit to Christie's, and we're also giving credit to Basquiat. This was a phenomenal work. I do believe it was third-party guaranteed. But as you said, Christie's always has some tricks up their sleeves. And yes, this work absolutely saved Christie's sale. Without it, the numbers would have seen a significant 32 million, I think is what you said, decline. And this was their first sale premiering after the announcement of the incident. So naturally, there might have been a little bit of struggles. But again, they performed very well. So really happy to see that Basquiat sale go, and also really excited to see what all of these sales are going to do for his print market.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. I mean, everyone wants a work on canvas or a work on paper, but everyone doesn't necessarily have the means to acquire one. It is quite the budget. Thankfully, there are also a number of prints that are available for sale. And something that we've noticed is that the supply doesn't quite match the demand. And so thankfully, the estates of Jean-Michel Basquiat have taken it upon them to release some official authorized Jean-Michel Basquiat posthumous prints. And they are still releasing these prints. Just a quick fun fact. They were originally signed by the artist's father, Gerard Basquiat. They are today signed by his sisters, Lizanne and Janine. And we do still see them being released sporadically. And they are performing better and better on the market. So if I had to underline one type of artwork that is to watch, it's definitely the posthumous Jean-Michel Basquiat prints.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to watch those as well. And such a fascinating topic being signed by his estate, one that we can go into much further detail on, and I'm looking forward to in another podcast. So let's see, we covered Christie's 21st century sale. Jasper, I don't think there were any Hockneys in that sale, but there was a very impressive Hockney in Christie's 20th century sale, which carried a large number, probably the highest number of high value works by the auction houses. Do you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, it was great work that he'd done in 1967, I believe, which is interesting because California, which was previously a massive canvas that was sold about a few months ago, just over or just under $30,000 was sold at Christie's. And this is California done in 1968, which is very sort of typical Hockney piece, acrylic on canvas on a similar scale. Now, this piece was done a year earlier and is a very nice work. It's called A Lawn Being Sprinkled. I believe the estimate was £20,000 to £30,000, and it's sold with buyer's premium around the £28.5 million. So an absolutely great result. Fortunately for Christie's, in light of the sort of cyber attacks, this was actually secured and guaranteed beforehand. So there was an argument of it's less as exciting because they kind of knew they had a bidder or a certain amount that was guaranteed, so that it would sell. Nonetheless, apparently it was quite an exciting time to be in the room when this did sell.
Right.
It's a lovely work. It's large scale, 150 by 150, and it's also had a beautiful provenance. It'd been exhibited. It was acquired directly by the current owner from the artist. It's subsequently been in galleries in New York, found its way to Europe, and was exhibited for many, many years in sort of high-end galleries. So it's really nice that it's got all of that provenance tracking back to the actual artist's studio, which always, creates like a nice story with something.
Yeah, these sales were in New York, as we've mentioned. I really do wish that these works would have traveled to the UK, so we could have gone to view them at the auction houses, because the Hockney work in particular, again, such a rare work from him. You look at it and it's definitely Hockney-esque, but I've never seen it before, and he's with the wave canvases that came to the auction block this time with that canvas, and then even the California large scale canvas that you mentioned that just sold recently in the March London auctions. We're really seeing sort of different works come to the market from Hockney, which is nice. But always nice to see them in person. And then, of course, the Basquiat canvases. There were so many of them. Wish we could have seen at least a few of those in person. Question to both of you. Jasper, you mentioned the auction house guarantee, so I'll start with you first. This is, I don't want to say third-party guarantees are bad. It's more so a strategy that has been employed by the auction houses for years and years, so it's nothing new. But I'm curious on both of your take by this, because all of the artworks that we've discussed, the majority of them, if not all, were secured by a third-party guarantee, or they were house-backed. How do you think? What is your take on this for the sales, Jasper? I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it definitely helped with Christie's, all the stuff that was going on. I mean, the amount of consignments that perhaps would have been lost without these guarantees, and what it really offers is Christie's to have more of a convincing pitch to clients when they're offering these works. They don't want them to get burnt. They want them to sell. It sort of de-risks Christie's to a certain extent. So you have a sort of third party guaranteeing that, and their risk is whatever risk they're willing to take. Does it sort of not incentivize aggressive bidding? Perhaps it does. So it does take a bit of an edge away. But really, I'd imagine Christie's could use that as a huge selling tactic in order to win the big lots and say that this will sell, that you will have people bidding up to a certain extent. So all in all, I think it's a great thing. If you put myself in the shoes of a seller, it would be something that would attract, having guarantee. It's auctions, the big unknown. So with those bigger lots, it's probably a very nice thing to be offered.
Yeah, I agree. Like you mentioned, I think what it comes down to is it's just a tactic from the auction houses and who can secure the greater lots. Louis, what about you? I know all of your Basquiats that I don't, well, yeah, all of your Basquiats, or the majority of them, I'm almost positive were third-party secured or house guaranteed. What's your take on that?
I couldn't agree more with everything that Jasper just said. I will say this, however, it would be interesting to see how far these works go if there wasn't a safety net. I think that there could be some very aggressive bidding on these beautiful works. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how the market will evolve in the future, obviously, but I have a lot of faith in Jean-Michel Basquiat and how specifically his posthumous prints are going to perform in the next few years.
I like that. I have a lot of faith in Basquiat as well, as I do in Hockney, as I do in the art market at large. So I'm conscious of time. So obviously in these podcasts, we don't have the capacity to talk about all the sales that have happened, but I do want to highlight a few. So in total, across Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips evening sales, Basquiat's total market share alone amounted to 93.3 million at the Hammer across 7 works. Hockney's market share during this round of sales amounted to 31.7 million, which is still a commendable result across only 2 works. And this is for the evening sales alone. So some other performances that I just want to highlight real quickly. Aside from Hockney and Basquiat artworks, of course, there were many other artists with commendable performances. There were strong performances from women artists, including Helen Frankenthaler, who was featured prominently throughout all of the auction sales. Georgia O'Keeffe had a strong performance with a flower painting titled Red Poppy in Christie's 20th Century sale. Also in the flower genre, a large-scale rendition of Andy Warhol's Flowers set a record and brought in 30.5 million in Christie's 20th Century sale. Phillips' evening sale featured a rare-to-the-market Statue of Liberty screen print by Andy Warhol, which achieved over 1 million with beads. A complete set of Warhol's Maryland's prints sold at Christie's post-war and contemporary day sale on Friday for 3.6 million, which outperformed its 2023 high. Christopher Wool has had several works featured throughout the sales as well, which all performed considerably well, especially considering that Wool's market has experienced somewhat of a downturn in recent years. Ed Ruscha had a commendable performance in Christie's 20th Century sale, and also the legendary Frank Stella. His work was featured prominently throughout the sales, whose artworks unfortunately fell slightly short of expectations. But, this just goes to say that sometimes the markets of deceased artists, especially even influential figures in art history like Frank Stella, sometimes they can be challenging to navigate. They can be unpredictable. As Louis said, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can only wait and see. So that's all for us from the May New York sales. You can find detailed auction reports of Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips evening and day sales via our website at Edition Magazine. So for all of our listeners, do check back for those and subscribe to this podcast at My Art Broker Talks. Jasper and Louis, for all of our listeners out there, if they want to chat about the art market at large, or Basquiat, or David Hockney, where can they find you? Louis, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, well, if you want to email me, my email is louis, Louis.denizet, DENIZET, at myartbroker.com. Or, of course, if you want to reach out via social media, or by submitting an inquiry on our website, myartbroker.com, it will find its way to me.
Excellent. And Jasper, what about you? Where can our listeners find you?
Brilliant. So the best would be on my email, which is jasper@myartbroker.com. And then we can get chatting. We can schedule a call. We can meet up. any questions that you have about David Hockney, amongst other sort of modern British artists, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. Jasper, Louis, it is always a pleasure doing these podcasts with you. June print auctions are coming up, and we will be back for those. So everyone tune in again.
Thank you
Great
so
to
much.
speak with you, Sheena.
Bye.